We are here with Rod Class, and we're going to ask Rod some questions about administrative process and what he's been doing for, over 20 some, almost 30 years, Rod?
Yes.
And studying and teaching. Today is Tuesday, the 26th of April, and we are here with Rod Class, and we've got some basic questions we want to ask him, and we want you to listen to the answers carefully. There are a lot of people who don't understand administrative process and don't understand the remedies that it provides for the people. So let's get into that, Rod, a little bit. Tell us about the Constitution. I guess that's where we want to start, right?
Right.
With the Constitution. Tell us that part of it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, these public officials only hold their job on good behavior. The Constitution of the United States, Federal Constitution, and each state Constitution, if you look into the legislative branch on your state and on the judicial branch of your state, it goes in and talks about removal. Here in the federal Constitution, and I know some of you are going to sit back and say, well, that's the corporate charter. That's exactly right. Under their corporate charter, under Article 3, it sits here and says under Section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, under Article 7 and 8, the Senate shall have sole power to try all impeachments. When sitting for the president, they shall be an oath or affirmation. When the president of the United States is tried, the chief judge shall preside, and no person shall be convicted without the commencement of 2/3 of the members present. The judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than removal from office and disqualified to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. Now, ladies and gentlemen, most people sit here and think it stops right there. Well, we got him out. We can't go any farther. That isn't what the Constitution says. That isn't what the Charter sits here and says. However you want to use this. This next line is what's important here. But the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, tried, judgment, and punishment according to law. So just because we did an impeachment on them, once they're out, they're liable for their criminal activity. This is part of what we're doing for administrative remedies. This is what we was teaching back in 2005 on impeachments, where you can go to your legislator and start the process. This is part of the administrative side. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not without remedy like you have been told. This is part of what we're teaching. This is part of the education side of this. This is why I would tell you, you have to know 4 things. You got to know their rules, got to know their language, you got to know their job, and you got to know congressional intent of what the rules, the language, and the job description is. Once you understand that, it isn't that hard to start doing accountability. The next step is, where do you find the administrative offices to bring them into for a tort claim? And where do you go in and file for an impeachment before the representatives? And let's sit here and say that they don't. You still have the administrative claims in each state that holds these people accountable. So we have some avenues, ladies and gentlemen, that we can work with on the administrative side. Sue, go ahead.
Taking all that into account, we've got a lot of people that are dragged into the court system for the stupidest reasons ever. And they're just stupid. Now, most people have to hire an attorney. They figure they have to go in front of a judge. They're going to have a hearing, blah, 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 and all this stuff. And they get an attorney because they don't know what else to do. How does administrative process differ from that? How does that get you out of that arena?
All right. You got to go back in to our history. That's where it starts at. Back in 1933, under the bankruptcy, where they placed agencies in charge of our system. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, you're not dealing with John Q. Public. You are dealing with an administrative agency. You're not dealing with a police officer. You're not dealing with a lady from Child Services. You're not dealing with somebody from IRS. You're dealing with an agency. And the difference is, if you allow them to drag you into their court, number one, they drag you into a judicial setting. And these are administrative agencies. We should be going to administrative hearing. This is why FDR, when he created the New Deal and he created all these agencies, he gave us a court, an administrative court, for us to deal with these public officials. So when you're going into their courtroom under the judicial side, they bypassed the administrative. They took you into a court who has no jurisdiction because it's a judicial review of an administrative hearing you never had.
Interesting. Most people don't know that.
That's exactly right.
Most people don't understand that. So in other words, you're coming in after they've summoned you. You're coming in at the tail end of it, when you should have been able to have access to the administrative end of it first to question, number one, who are you? Number two, where's your authority coming from? Number three, show me the law. Number four, prove it's me. All of these things that we normally have to hire an attorney for in their courtroom, in their jurisdiction, in their court. So in other words, you're able to get this information before you even go before a judge.
Right. Because see, the thing of it is, Sue, what we're sitting here talking with, Title 49, the United States Code, is really a good, solid foundation for what we're talking about here. Under Title 49, Chapter 149, it deals with the Secretary of Transportation, and it deals with traffic violations. All right, first off, a traffic violation is a civil penalty, not criminal. According to Title 49, you have to go before the Secretary of Transportation. This is an administrative office because your license was given to you by an administrative office. Remember, your license was not given to you by a judicial officer. At no time did you ever have a judge take you out and give you a driver's test or a prosecutor. It was an administrative agency. So what happens here is that you have to go before the Secretary of Transportation. He makes a ruling. All right. He is classified as an administrative judge under Title 5, 3105 because he is the top dog of the administration. He's the one who you go before. When you go before the appeals court on the federal side, that comes into your judicial review, which is under Title 5, under Section 702. That's your judicial review. What they've done here with us is they bypassed the administrative. They took it straight into judicial review before a judicial review judge, but called it jurisdiction. They called it criminal jurisdiction. They can't do that.
I was going to say, they'll tell you it was a crime.
Yes.
You know, this is a criminal, this is against criminal statute number, whatever. And you think you're a criminal now and you're being drug into criminal court, but you're not.
Well, no, and this is what we're sitting here saying. The moment you get a ticket, the moment you get stopped, this is what I've tried to tell people. The day that you get stopped, let's sit here and say you got stopped at 4:15 in the afternoon. By the time you get home, you start your paperwork. Your paperwork goes to two places. One, it goes out to the administrative side. All right. And that administrative side is you're going back to, because remember, that police officer is not what you think. That police officer is part of an administration. He is just the bottom post of who he is working under. When you're dealing with automobiles, traffic, you're dealing with the DOT. You're dealing with the Department of Motor Vehicle. That's the top administration. So you want to go to them, file a complaint, but you also want to find your administrative court. You want to find both of these. But you're also filing paperwork and to his boss, who's in charge of him. And remember, there's a rank of people. We're going to get into that in the seminar. This is just an introduction of why the webinars, what we're teaching, is so important. But you file paperwork in. Then you file paperwork into that judicial court saying, excuse me, I just removed this from your jurisdiction into the proper venue and proper jurisdiction. You do that immediately, ladies and gentlemen. You don't sit here and waste time.
Okay. So the webinars you're going to show us what type of paperwork to put in.
Right.
How to word it and how to ask the right questions.
Right.
To get the answers. Okay. And that's just a simple traffic ticket. Now this works in just about anything, doesn't it? Will it work in a foreclosure?
Yes, it will, because you got to remember, again, you're dealing with an agency. But Rod, that's a bank. Ladies and gentlemen, where does the bank derive its finances from? We don't want to call it money. Actually, it's credit. But where does the bank get its finances from? What federal agency? Think about it. Where's it come from? It comes from the Treasury Department. Now, you have an issue here. You got a foreclosure. Now you need to go back to the Secretary of Treasury, just like we did the Secretary of Transportation, ask for an administrative hearing. But we also have another issue here. We have HUD, which is part of this because they are part of the federal funding program.
That's interesting.
So you not only have to notify the Department of Treasury, Secretary of Treasury, you go back and notify HUD. You also go back and notify the Federal Trade Commission on this. Why? Because the issue comes up if what the federal law sits there and says, ladies and gentlemen, you get into the statutes at large. That's congressional intent. What's their rules? What's their language? What's their job? What's congressional intent? If you get back into Title 31, which is in statutes at large, you go in and read this. It explains why you need to contact the Secretary of Treasury on a foreclosure because you're not dealing with money. Go ahead, Sue.
That's really interesting. So you can actually get remedy for a foreclosure using administrative process.
Yes.
Okay. Now you have had a huge case in DC courts that started back in 2013. And you've used this process all throughout this. You were facing, what was it, 10 years in jail and like over a $200,000 fine?
Well, they was wanting to do 21 years and 250,000. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what you were up against. Had you let them drag you into their system the way they drag everybody else, but you didn't allow that to happen. How come you're out now? And how come you didn't have to pay that?
All right. The reason why, ladies and gentlemen, is this. I went back in and I busted them under their own rules of criminal procedure. Criminal procedure sit here and said under probable cause, Rule 4, they had to have a complaint, they had to have an affidavit, and they either had to have a summons or a warrant for a probable cause charge. It was, well, we got probable cause, so we can search. No, 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 no. Your rules sits here and says, okay, under the criminal rules 3, 4, and 5, again, it says they had to have a complaint. They had to have an affidavit. They had to have a summons or a warrant from a judge. Civil rules procedure, rule 3, sits here and says the same thing. They got to have a complaint. They had to have an affidavit. Ladies and gentlemen, you go back and check your file, and there is none of these things in any of this. But then we turn around and we busted them under the rules of evidence. Under 402, 501, 402, 501 gets into what is admissible evidence in a courtroom. What's admissible? Mr. Klaas, you can't use the Constitution. I object. Evidence under 402 says it's admissible. I have to use it. You got to abide by it. You're using federal statutes, and you're under rules of evidence.
You admitted that in your case, didn't you, as evidence? The Constitution and their own rules?
Yes.
As evidence.
That's evidence.
So therefore, that put it on the public record, that put it on the court record, and now they couldn't ignore it, and they couldn't say, oh, that doesn't exist.
Exactly right.
Administrative process, you guys. That's what this is.
That's exactly what this is. Because, ladies and gentlemen, what we're doing here, and I have told you people in the past on AIB radio, I do not know how to defend myself. I don't know the first thing on defending myself. I'm a hell of a prosecutor. Because I can go in and point out every one of their rules violation. I can go back in and show every one of their ethics violations. I can go back and show their language violation, and I can go back and show their congressional intent violation of what they're doing. And ladies and gentlemen, this is what we did to them. That's why I went through 5 judges and 5 prosecutors on this.
And it all started when you just parked in a spot that said no parking. And you came out, that had changed since the last time you were there, so you weren't even aware of it, really. Right. And then you came out back to your Jeep, and it was surrounded.
Yeah, because that parking sign was, 15 foot off the ground instead of at eye level. But what was the kicker? Again, they sit down and says, I was charged for readily accessible. Okay. What is readily accessible? It means that you have it on your hip. You have it within your grasp to pull it out.
Well, it was readily accessible after they searched your Jeep, and they found those things. Of course, they were readily accessible, but before then, they weren't.
Well, no, the thing is, it wasn't even readily accessible at that time.
Right.
They had to actually.
They were locked up.
Part in order to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
You got to remember, I went through 2 metal detectors. I was searched out on the street between the House and the Senate by a motorcycle cop. I was searched. And then when I went back to the Jeep, I was searched again. They didn't find anything on me. So how could it be readily accessible? Again, ladies and gentlemen, you got to go back and understand the verbiage, understand the words, what this means, how to come back to fight them.
So now you're getting into, this is your DC gun case we're talking about. We're getting into the actual remedy now. What has happened? What has transpired since then? We've had a judge step down, correct?
Yep.
We've also had a change in the ordinance in DC that originally said you couldn't carry, you couldn't have a firearm with you, right?
Well, again, let's go back and let's not use the word firearm because, see, that is misleading and putting false information before the people. Because if the issue would ever come up, and it did come up in D.C., Mr. Klaas, you had a firearm. I object, Your Honor. I did not have a firearm. I did not have a shotgun that was modified to a barrel of 18 inches or less, overall length of 26. I did not have a rifle that was cut down to 16 inches, overall length less than 26. I did not have a fully automatic, and I did not have a silencer. I did have a pistol, and I did have a rifle. I had carry a concealed permit. So see, again, it goes right back into verbiage, and I hammered them on this. I stayed on that point of what I had and not what they declared I had. Big difference.
Exactly. There's a big difference in what is written on paper that they're supposed to follow and what they tell you.
Exactly
Big
right.
difference.
And this is why we got into the National Firearms Act of 1939, the 1968 Gun Control Act, the 2005 Firearms Owner Protection Act. That's why we got into Title 26 under 5845, the tax purposes of a firearm, of what it is, because it exactly what I sit here and said it was: sawed-off shotgun, sawed-off rifle, under Title 27, CFR 479.11, ATF, what is classified through the Alcohol, Firearms, and Tobacco Company. What is a firearm? And it isn't what I had. Ladies and gentlemen, these are your arguments. This is what you have to come back in and fight on and stand your grounds on.
Absolutely. And it's not like you have to have this in your head and learn it all right away. It's all available on the internet.
Yep.
You just need to know where to look, and you will be able to find all of this information, and you will see for yourself that this happens in every country, it happens in every state, it happens in every city.
Well, it is. And you're talking about other countries. Ladies and gentlemen, this country is no different than any other country. Because from what we found out, every country has what is known as an Administrative Procedure Act, which is a remedy for you and I to be able to go back in and do accountability. And every country has what is known as a tort claim set up against public offices. What we're teaching here, all you have to do is adapt it to your country of what you're dealing with. Do the same research that we're doing here. Get into their language, get into their rules, get into their job description, know what legislation has wrote. Because it's like we talked on CCN in the Netherlands. All right, they come under the Hague Convention. It is what is known as private international law. Private international law. And it says it's under a Hague Convention. You go back and read that Hague Convention. It only deals with public offices. It doesn't deal with John Q. Public.
Interesting. So let's say you get, what remedy could you get out of your DC gun case? Or even let's talk about a ticket, something very simple that everybody gets. Once you've gone through this process, when you've gotten a speeding ticket or whatever, what are your remedies, and what exactly could you wind up with in your pocket?
Okay.
And what happens to these officials that aren't following their own rules?
Okay. What has come out of this? Several things. Whenever I got stopped and I filed my administrative remedy, immediately after I got stopped, I got a court date hearing for the administrative court. My other court hearing shut down for the county because my complaint against them was higher than theirs against me. So they dismissed my case. We got the rulings that these people are not public officials because the Attorney General for the state came in and told the administrative court, these are not agencies or employees of the state. They're private contractors. They don't work here. I come back in and says, no, sir, here it is under North Carolina general statutes. Here's the Highway Safety Fund that they're collecting. Here is the grant money through the State Justice Institute that they're collecting. And the administrative court says, well, Mr. Class, we're going to rule that they don't work for us. They're private contractors. Therefore, we don't have any ties or any responsibility to people who are not public officials. Thank you very much. Now remember, this was the administrative side. Then we went to the judicial review side. This is what they're doing to us. They're bypassing the administrative. They're taking it straight into judicial review. Now, I went to a superior court judge, a judicial judge. But because this was an administrative agency that I was dealing with, he had to step into the administrative side of this. Step out of the judicial side. He had to step into the administrative side under that Title V 702, Administrative Law Judge. He was now the review court for this. He came back and ruled the same thing. So now we've got the rulings that these people don't work for us. The buildings are on, buildings are open, the lights are on, but nobody's home. My DC case put a hamper onto me. Right now, I am free and clear, and through some research, we have found the administrative tort claim at commission to go play with. Ladies and gentlemen, this is part of what this teaching is all about. This hearing, what we're doing right now, this introduction, is to show that there's remedies. There are other avenues for you. You're not stuck being a sheep and being sheared. We're able to give you a set of clippers. Okay? You now can do the shearing.
And it's not that difficult either. And it's well, watching you go through the DC gun case, how many laughs have we had? I mean, really, over the silliness of what these people do. Once they're being held accountable and they know it, it all of a sudden hits them. Oh no, there's somebody here that's holding me accountable to my job. I better go read up on my job description.
Well, yeah.
And it's hilarious.
Yes, because you got to remember what came out of this in DC. I got two quotes from DC. One, the government don't take no stand, and it didn't explain why. We just don't take no stand. And the government opposes, but they never explain why. We oppose, but we're not going to explain why we oppose. And we don't take a stand because we don't want to explain that either. That was the whole argument. That was the two filings that was put in, is that the government opposes and the government takes no stand. Well, what do you take a stand on and what do you oppose? Put it in writing. Ladies and gentlemen, this is part of the teaching that we're getting into. This is part of what we're trying to get you educated in. We're not trying to get you educated in the patriot stuff or all this other garbage that's out here, because we have to play in their sandbox. But the difference between playing in their sandbox, we're bringing our own toys. And we're bringing our own toys that belong to them, their rules, their regulations, and their guidelines, and their job duties. And we're in here to sit down and say, you're not doing your job right. Like I said, I'm not in here as a defendant. I'm in here as a prosecutor. And you need to come in the same way. Don't be someone who gets sheared. We need to start doing the shearing. That's what this education is all about.
Yeah, and it's a difficult concept for a lot of people to understand, Rod. They think administrative means, years of learning and study like you have done, but you have the background now to where you can teach it, and everything's out on the internet. It's not like, it's going to take months and months. It's certainly a lot cheaper than hiring an attorney who's an officer of the court who isn't going to work for you. He's going to work for the court, basically. So,
They have to.
Yeah.
Because this is what I pointed out up there in DC in my DC gun case. They gave me a public defender. He was with the Federal Bar Association. And I asked him, I said, you belong to the federal bar? He says, yes, I do. I have to. I says, good. Then let you and I have a conversation. Let's talk about Title 36 of the United States Code under ceremonies, under Chapter 705 of the Federal Bar Association, known as the corporation. And let's sit here and talk about the only people that you can represent are government agencies and government entities within your charter. And that's what that 705 is. It's a charter from 705.01 to 705.12. It's their charter. And it tells you who they represent, who they're supposed to represent, and how they are supposed to represent their clients. And it isn't you and I. But under that section 705.03, it gets into disqualification. How can they be disqualified? One is they fail to uphold the Constitution. Two, they fail to uphold the federal statutes. That's an act of treason. They are to be disqualified immediately for doing this. This is why, and that's the same thing with what we're talking about here in North Carolina. North Carolina, under Chapter 84 of the North Carolina General Statutes, 84.2, it tells you who cannot practice law. We're not going to get into that, but I want you people to go back and do your own research in North Carolina General Statutes under 84.2. Go back and read who is prohibited. You're going to be shocked because it's not us.
Interesting. And we never think to look in those places.
No.
So, okay, so I get a ticket and I find out who to go to. I find out, that there's a lot of wrongs being done here against me because people aren't following the proper procedures. My remedy is to go on the administrative side, to follow that process. Now, once I've gotten my answers, now what do I do?
Okay, this is what is known as a tort claim. Now, federal government has what is known as an SF, Sam Frank, Standard Form 95. What this is a tort action where you're coming in, you're going to the administrations, you are laying out their procedural violations. Now, that oath of office is one of the most powerful things that you can use for violation, because when they swear an oath, ladies and gentlemen, think of it this way. And this is what I ran into in DC. Judge Wilkins says, Mr. Class, raise your right hand. Said, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I said, yes, sir. He says, now, if you lie to me, this is contempt of court. You can go to jail. I said, oh, wait a minute. I said, are you telling me that whoever takes an oath, now remember, these people are required to take an oath to the Constitution. I said, you telling me whoever takes an oath, if they lie, this is perjury? He says, yes. I said, does this apply to your side? He says, yes. I says, good. Let's talk about your prosecutor. Did he sit here and swear an oath that he would not mislead, misrepresent, misconstrue, put false information before this court under the Bar Association? And that's where the judge shut the hearing down. And that's the last time I seen that judge and the prosecutor, because I got him for perjury.
That was the end of that.
That was it.
Two down.
This is what we're saying, ladies and gentlemen. That oath that they take to the bar, that oath that they take to the Constitution, if you go back and understand their rules, they're committing perjury. And you can bust them on this, because under the impeachment side, it goes in and shows where they failed to defend and uphold the Constitution and protect the rights of the citizens. Under that oath, it's called dereliction of duty. That's a chargeable offense. This is an administrative violation on their side. This is something that is very powerful to start out with. Go ahead.
So these are the things that we'll be learning, and we'll be laying them out one by one for everybody to take a look at. We can go through the small things, we can go through the large things, and it'll be a series of webinars, maybe not any more than an hour or so at a time, maybe. And then Q&A, we'll have a Q&A at least once a month, maybe twice. And you will be able to get through this process. And by the time you're done, you may not know everything that Rod Class knows, but you will know exactly how to get yourself and your family out of a ticket, out of even car registration. I'm really into that because I just got the car registration tags, you know, my notification for my tags, and it costs a fortune here. So now I know exactly who to go to start asking the questions. Why are you giving this to me? Why am I paying this bill? And once I get done, I have a feeling I won't have to pay this bill. So, but just going by step.
Yes. Everything is a process. No, it's like being in the military. You have a manual for everything out here. If you're in the military, they'll give you a manual how to fold your socks. They'll give you a manual how to fold your clothes, how to make your bed, how to sit down and brush your teeth, how to comb your hair. Everything there is a manual. There's a manual out here for everything. All we have to do is find it.
Absolutely. Well, this has been great. I hope we've answered some basic questions that people have about administrative process, and that it's not the monster that people think it is, and it's not it is quite the answer if you want to get them on a different level as far as coming in as a plaintiff rather than a defendant. It will empower you. So I highly suggest you stay tuned. We'll be putting out more videos like this so that people can understand, and then we'll be putting out a sign up and to collect a mailing list for everybody and let you know about more webinars coming up. And that's all we have to say for now. What do you want to say, Rod?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we on here have talked about a lot of different issues, and every issue falls back under administration. There isn't anything out here that when we're dealing with the government isn't an administration. Whether you're dealing with child services, whether you're dealing with IRS, whether you're dealing with foreclosures, whether you're dealing with a traffic ticket, whether you are dealing with even a criminal activity. And we don't, this broadcast is not to promote how to get around. This broadcast is to sit here and teach us how to go back and do accountability on those who violate. They commit more felonies. Something you people don't understand. State Justice Institute under Title 28 United States Code, under Chapter 113, it's federally funded. That private organization gets federal funds to come out to every single court and hand them federal funds to teach them how to get around us. Something you people may not be aware of. I want you to go look it up on the internet. Federal funding for bulletproof vests for police officers. $393 million have been put out for bulletproof vests for police officers. Under Title 23 CFR Section 1250, 40% of federal funding goes to your political subdivision, which is why you are being drugged into a judicial review side of this thing so they can embezzle the administrative federal 40%. Okay. Now, some of you are going to ask the question here. How do we come back in and force federal laws into our city courts, our county courts? I want you to go back in and look up in the United States Attorney's Manual. United States Attorney's Manual, USAM. Look up choice of law. under Section 210. It gets into the Clearfield Trust Doctrine. And it shows that federal statutory, federal regulations override the state across the board. Why? Because the state is accepting that federal funding through the State Justice Institute, through the Highway Safety Act, through your birth certificate, through the Social Security. Because when you're dealing with a child issue, remember, you're not dealing with the public servant. You're dealing with the agency. What is the agency ahead of child services? What's the top agency? See, that's what we're trying to teach here. What's the top agency? Top agency is Social Security, because if you go back and check, Social Security has already paid these people. So now it's a process. I want an administrative hearing. We're not going to go to the Judicial Review Court. We're not going downtown. We're going to go to the Social Security office, and we're going to have an accountant of the amount of money that the state has been paid through the Social Security Act and why it's not being used properly. These are the things that we're going to get into. There are going to be different segments on this. But ladies and gentlemen, your remedy lies with the administrative side. That's the accountability side. This is what FDR put up for us. This is why he created all these agencies. This is why he created all of these administrative procedure side, the tort claim. This is why the private attorney general came out in 1866. And that's another question here. How are you claiming to be a private attorney general? Congress put it out in 1866 and gave it to the people. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you got to remember something here. Sue and Steve and Rebecca and several other people, jury, we've all talked about this. We, the people, are the cash flow. Was it for us, these people wouldn't have a job. We are the ones that allow them to operate. Without us, they wouldn't have a job. And for you people who sit here and say, well, my God, Rod, you can't beat City Hall. I want you to take and go down to the election board. I want you to sit here and see who applied for that position for City Hall. How did he get there? What was his means of taking that office? He didn't walk in and says, I'm the dictator, I'm taking it. He had to come to who in order to obtain that office? He had to come to John Q. Public. This is where the issue lies. The government has nothing that it didn't come from us. When they did that 1933 bankruptcy and they did that 1935 Social Security Act, that 1935 Social Security Act, and I had several FBI agents and other people, but we had one in particularly that came down and we showed them where it said that when you were born, you was worth $1.8 million. That's the day that you was born. That's 1935. The state for the children was giving $1 million each fiscal year. Not once, each fiscal year. Not for the entire birth. It was for each birth. And that makes a difference. You could have, let's sit here and say that for 1 year that we had maybe 6,000 kids born. That wasn't $1 million for 6,000 kids. That was 6,000 kids at $1 million each that the state received. Ladies and gentlemen, this is part of the education. This is part of the knowledge. This is part of teaching you the administrative side. The attorneys can't do it because they're part of the system. They are sworn to secrecy. Now, there are a lot of them starting to come through, and they're starting to come out. You know, I'm working with one right now, not by my choice, okay? I did not hire them. The appeal court hired them out of DC. All right. It was Jenner and Block, LLP, law firm. The amount of paperwork that these people put in is verifying and validating and supporting all of my paperwork that we've talked about my DC case, how I went after them administratively. This law firm has not found defects in my paperwork. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the difference by doing this administratively. Understanding their rule, understanding their language, understanding their job, and knowing congressional intent. They pulled this nationwide law firm in to come in to go through my paperwork, and they have come back and pointed out the same thing I did. The prosecutor never answered my paperwork. The judge denied all the arguments on the Second Amendment right, which was a violation on their side. It wasn't one judge. It was all the judges that I've dealt with on this. They went back and showed where the judge reminded the prosecutor, don't you think you ought to answer this man's paperwork? And I pointed out in their rules, they had 14 days, they had 21 days, they had 30. I don't care, pick one. You went past the time limit, no matter what we did here, whether it's 14, 21, or 31, you went past the time limit. This law firm's coming back in and validating all this stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't hire these people. The court system did. I went in their informal pauperous into this court. I proved that there was no money. I proved, and the judge sat down and put me under informal pauperous, and this law firm got hired. So it wasn't a process that I put $100 million into this case and this firm jumped in. I went in here bankrupt, got my case, and the system hired a multi-million-dollar law firm to go through my paperwork. This is the significance of what we're teaching. But the thing of it is, ladies and gentlemen, you have to put your undivided attention into this. Once you start understanding this, then it becomes simple. We teach you the basis of this thing. It's repetition of who you deal with. It doesn't matter. We're dealing with agencies. We're not dealing with you and I. We're dealing with agencies. We're dealing with people, but we're dealing with employees of that agency. And who is the top agency over who we are dealing with? It isn't a matter of who we are, it's who they are and who employs them and who they're working under. That's the administrative side. That's the advantage to this, is to run them up to their bosses and bring a complaint and go after their bond. Sue, you got anything else?
I think it's amazing because I hear a lot of people say, that judge ought to be in jail, or that attorney ought to go to jail, and blah, 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 you know, because they get so angry at these people. And I totally understand what they're saying. But the more people that come out and do this and hold these people accountable, this is how you do it. And people will go to jail. People will pay the price.
Yep.
If you do this, and if more people were able to do it, if everybody did it with a ticket that they got, oh my God, they could change their state, they could change their county. Because now they're going to realize, that county's going to realize, we're dealing with people who know what they're doing. We're dealing with people that we need to be accountable for. And they're being reminded of that through this process. And I think that's the best form of enforcement that you could ever, in this system anyway, that you're going to get, is self-enforcement.
Well, it is, but see, again, like you and I sit here and talk, a lot of people get angry. Okay, when they get angry, they lose what they're going after. I'm different. The more they piss me off, the digger I dig my heels in, and the more I'm going to find more flaws with what they do. And if more of us would sit here and don't let the anger side take over, but use it as a tool to go back in and find their errors, find their screw. And ladies and gentlemen, once you understand, it is not this hard to find their screw ups in any of this.
Well, they all do it. They all do it because nobody's held them accountable.
And that's it.
They're like runaway trains, all of them, making their own rules as they go to cover up whatever it is that they screwed up. And half of them don't even know their entire job anymore.
Well, that's it. It's like out here, I had an incident with the state highway patrolman out here in front of the house. And I was trying to be very polite, trying to have a private conversation with him, and he escalated it. He proceeded to tell me how the state owns that ditch and how the state owns. I said, no, sir, they don't own squat. I paid for it. It belongs to me. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what you have to remember. The state cannot own nothing. They are guardians over it. They are caretakers. Anything that the state has came from the people. That's the same thing with the federal government. Anything they have came from us. And when I told that statey that, he just got flabbergasted because he didn't know what else to say because he knew I was right. State don't own that. I own it. They're here to take care of it, but I own it because I paid for it. And when he made the comment, well, I'm State Highway Patrol, I says, no, sir, because I already took you to the administrative court and I got a ruling. You're nothing more than a private citizen. Nothing more than a private individual. I stripped you of your immunity. And that was pretty much the end of the conversation with him and I, because he didn't want to talk no more because I had more answers that I could sit here and hammer him with than he could sit here and come back with, because no matter what he had, I had an answer for it. And ladies and gentlemen, we really don't recommend getting into a consultation with these people out on the street. Take your ticket. Politely smile at him, says, I'm going to have you before an administrative court. Just grin, go home, and start the process. And once they learn that you can take them to the administrative side and you can take them into a tort claim, then you now control the sandbox. The sandbox don't belong to them anymore. It's our sandbox. It always has been our sandbox. They just been the bully kicking the sand in our face. And we just very politely just grabbed him by the toe and twisted his toe. So you're not going to do this no more.
And getting them to admit where their funding comes from,
Yes.
And who pays their gives them their wages every 2 weeks seems to really enlighten them and change their attitude a little bit. And this is what this process does as well. It makes them realize who pays their bills.
But what it also does, it makes you realize. That's the thing. It makes you realize that, wait a minute, this comes from me. I'm the energy behind this. I'm the one who sits down and sees that these people are taken care of. It's like I wrote that letter to the State Highway Patrol. I reminded them They don't even own their own home if it wasn't for the people paying their salary. They don't own their own car if it wasn't for the people paying their own salary. Now, the question comes up, what's the difference between them and us? The difference is that we're out here working a real job. Whether you're working at McDonald's flipping hamburgers, you are serving customers. You are out here creating revenue. These public officials sit here and live off of us because we are supplying them with revenues for services for a public office that they're supposed to be functioning. And this is where you can go back into your state constitution. It sits here and it has a section under the Bill of Rights that gets in and tells you that government was formed for our benefit. It was there created for our usage. And I want to remind you, people, of the Declaration of Independence. It gets in and says, it is up to us to modify, sit here and take these people out, or to abolish their entire system. And don't say they can. It is up to us to abolish it. It is up to us to modify it. It is up to us to change their action. Don't say them. It says the people. We are the people. And that's the same thing with the federal funding programs, the video that we got our hands on. It is up to us to make the complaint for misuse of federal funding. It is up to us to go back to the agency that gave them that federal funding and bring a complaint in of misuse and abuse of that public office for the federal funding that they have obtained because they're not using it properly. Everything comes back to us, not them.
It's like with any employer, they need to know the job descriptions of their employees. They need to keep a handle on their employees. We are the employer, they are the employees. So that's where our responsibility comes in.
Exactly right. This goes right back in. If you had a maid and a butler, at what point in time would you allow your maid and butler to take over your checking book and take over your bank account and take over your home? And now you are now serving them while they are still accepting a paycheck, and they decided they're going to give themselves a raise whether you like it or not. This is how it's going to be. The first answer to this, and a lot of people are out here doing it, and this is where the difference is with what I teach. Let's get around it. Let's get out of it. Okay? You have a $3 million home that has just been taken over by your butler and your maid. And your bank account's just been taken over. Your checking and savings and all of your stocks and bonds been taken over by your employees. Where are you going to go that they're not going to follow you? Because you are the assets to this. Where are you going to go? No matter where you go, they show up with you. It is easier to sit down and understand how to fight them in their own sandbox and bring in their own rules and regulations and put them back out in the servant home where they belong. Because that is exactly what they are, servants. We are the masters. We are the employer. We are the, like in labor management, we're the top dog on this thing. If it wasn't for us, they would have nothing. We have a labor management dispute. We're the employer, they're the employee.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So I hope you guys got an idea of what it is Rod's going to be teaching in these classes. We're going to start with administrative remedy. We figure the first webinar should be up in the next 2 to 3 weeks. As we get them recorded and as we get the structure going, you'll have documents that you can look at. You'll have links that you can go to for further research. We'll provide all of those things for you as the classes go on. So check us out. We will be sending out more information over YouTube, over adventuresintosovereignty.org, and over the naturaljusticeacademy.org websites. You'll see some changes there. And keep in touch. We'll keep in touch and let you know what's next. Thanks, Rod. Oh, anything? You have one more thing?
I think we ought to sit down and we ought to at least let the people know what we are looking at for a monthly fee.
Okay, you want us to discuss that? Okay.
What we have set up so far is that we have talked about a $150 a month donation on this. I've already got a couple people that have waiting for this who's already paid up front. So we're talking about $150 for donation for this. This is an education class. This is not a legal class. We're not giving legal advice. We're not lawyers on any of this. All we're doing is going back in and we're showing you how to find their rules, find their job, learn their language, how to dig up congressional intent on the state side as well as federal side. Because that's the important side of this. Because what you find in these law books have been misquoted in a lot of different areas. And that's where the problem's coming in. That's why we go back to what legislation says and what the actual law, when it was written, how it was to be interpreted. So there are other courses that's coming up. There got to be videos, possibility books and stuff that to be purchased on what we're doing. But we are looking about whoever's interested. We're looking about 100, 150 a month.
How many classes are we gonna do for that?
Okay, we're gonna knock out roughly about try to do 2 classes a week with a Q&A as part of one of them at 1 or 2 of them at a time.
Okay.
We can ask questions. Ladies and gentlemen, this course that we're looking at, we're not looking at a 30-day course here, okay? This course could run you a year, could run a year and a half. Why? The amount of information that we have that you need to understand. We're only able to do these at an hour at a time. For the simple reason, we have found anything over an hour, people have a problem with. They can't absorb it all. It's too much. So we break these things down to an hour in length. So this is why we're going to extend this thing out, possibility a year, year and a half. Now, there's going to be several different phases in this. These are going to be pre-recorded. Those who are in the beginning of this are going to get a lot of the possibility live webinar side of this. Those who come in second, in order to keep starting over from the beginning, they're going to be recorded for them to be able to start while we keep advancing on. This is like a college course. Every time you get a new student, the teacher don't stop and start back over the beginning again. You have to keep advancing. The amount of information that we have is vast, but it isn't as complicated as what you think, because once you start understanding the basis of how the foundation is, then this stuff just, like I said, no matter what you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with foreclosures, whether you're dealing with IRS, whether you're dealing with traffic, whether you're dealing with child services, whether you're dealing with workman's comp, whether you're dealing with the VA, whether you're dealing with Social Security, it's all the same once you understand the basis of this. And you can sit down and apply this in every aspect. But you first have to understand the foundation. You have to understand the four main things: their rules, their language, their job, and what Congress says, how it's supposed to be done. Once you understand them four things, ladies and gentlemen, will sit here and change the history of this country. And the reason why is you're going back and you're holding them accountable to what their design of that job is supposed to be. Because if you really understood the court system is designed, and Harvey sat here and said it very well on AIB radio. The court is for Sue and I to go into. If Sue and I have a problem, then that judicial court is for her and I to go into. If we are dealing with an administrative agency, then we're supposed to be going into an administrative court, because this is an administrative problem. If an administrative agency is attacking me, this is an administrative issue, because why are they stepping outside of their administrative procedures and dealing with John Q. Public whenever their rules are designed for them and their kind and not us? So the three bases here, and Harvey's right. If it's Sue and I, the judicial court's there for her and I to solve our problem. When you're dealing with an administrative agency, then these are all administrative hearings, never judicial. Not like they're using it. They're obtaining federal funding based on fraud through an administrative agency. They're obtaining that federal funding. So this becomes an administrative issue. If I have a beef with them, I take them to the administrative. We have taken them into these judicial courts so many times to sit here and say, we don't have jurisdiction. Well, you got jurisdiction when they drag me in. Well, that's different. You don't know any better. But when we drag them in, we don't have. And they're absolutely right. Why? Because this is an administrative problem. We have to take it back to the administration. This is what the tort claim is all about. Bringing damages against them administratively. So, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, the amount of knowledge that we're going to be dealing with can't be done in 30 days. It's going to be done for over a year, year and a half, maybe even longer, because there is so much ground to cover. And there is new information coming about daily, because we're going to have to show you, like Sue and Steve and I went through last night, to find the administrative tort claim place. It's under different names. It isn't the same name. Same thing with your administrative hearing office. It's under different names. You have to learn how to come back in and hunt. This is part of the program on this. This is part of the education level on this, of what we're getting into. Are we lawyers? No. Do I have a law degree? No. Am I Judge Dale? No. No way. I'm better than that. But ladies and gentlemen, this is what we're getting into. It's your education. It's your freedom. Freedom is, most people have an ideal freedom is, it's just there. That's what my wife, it's just there. Your freedom is only there as long as you fight for it and you know how to fight for it. That's what this education is about. It's about bringing you up the right way. Now, there's no shortcuts on this. I want to tell you that right now. And there's a lot of you going to want to take shortcuts. There is none. Because I will challenge you at any given time when you decide you want to take a shortcut, you remember one thing. I want you to go get a box mix of cake. Mix cake. Go get a box cake. I want you to pour it out, and I want you to make a cake without the eggs, the water, the margarine, the bowl, the mixer, and the oven. That's your shortcut. That's what you guys are getting into. Well, Rod, we're going to add an egg. That's still not putting it in a bowl and having the margarine and having the mixer and having the oven. There is no shortcuts in this. You want to sit down and we want to change the system. Ladies and gentlemen, we are changing our status by changing their status back to that public office. And once we change their status back to that public office, then our status will change.
Exactly. Well said. Okay.
Thank you.
I think we've given you enough for this first one, and we'll probably do another one once we get some questions in and answer that one, and we will be bringing you the webinars very soon.
Okay. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, see you in the webinar. I hope you come. Like I said, a lot of education here, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of education.
Absolutely. And for a good price too. It's not too much to pay to learn how to be free.
That's it.
We'll see you soon.
Yes.